So thank you very much, Ralf, for this introduction, and a warm welcome from my side as well. Before we start, I would like to mention one thing. The subtitle of this conference reads "The Lack of a Joint Response." So we have designed this conference to talk about the intricacies of climate change and humanitarian action, because climate change obviously is the biggest threat to our collective survival. Yet there is another existential threat looming all of our heads and holding a tight grip onto our hearts. Every day we see death and destruction being unleashed in Ukraine, in Sudan, in Gaza. Last year in mid-October, the Humanitarian Congress took place in Berlin. I think it was around October 10, I guess, and I remember myself being astonished why in a room full of high-functioning humanitarians, we lacked the word to actually speak about it, what's happening. Now, 10 months later, after that, the reality is a lot more terrifying and horrifying than we would have imagined back then. Or better, I would say I would have imagined, because I don't want to hide behind a collective we. Today, we do not have a panel nor a keynote on the topic either. That is on us, I have to say. That is on me. Tomorrow, we will speak about the intersectionalities between conflict and climate change, but we do not have a panel that directly speaks on the man-made disaster unfolding in Gaza in front of our eyes, and what that means specifically for the future of humanitarianism, but also for the fight against climate change and its impact. I do want to say one thing. I do want to make sure that everyone in this room and also online knows that this conference is also a place to talk about it. To draw the connection here as well, on stage and off stage, I want to invite you and I want to encourage you, the audience, the panelists, the commentators, the service providers, us as CHA, to draw the connection wherever you see adequate. This is a humanitarian conference. It is designed by humanitarians, for humanitarians and their usual and their unusual allies, and I'm sure we are up to the task. So let's get on with the keynote dialogue then. With that said, I welcome all of you to the first session of this conference. In the spirit of the conference, we attempt to reduce the time where people are speaking down to audiences. Also with this keynote dialogue, we want to try something new. Usually, we would choose one very prominent person to open the conference for visibility reasons, for publicity, donor relations, you name it. We all know the game. So as we intend to bring people together, also this first act should be a dialogue. We have designed it. My role here will be quite small, that of a conductor, as Hugo aptly described it during one of our briefing calls. I will be guiding you through the next 30 minutes. So let me begin with introducing our two speakers. I have invited both of you here as ideal, typical representatives of the climate and the humanitarian community. Now, we all know that people carry in and around them so much more than what is behind such one-dimensional labels. Evidently, also Nesrine and Hugo are so much more than humanitarians and than climate activists. And in this, I think they're a perfect representation of both and complement each other in really wonderful ways. So let me give you some details. Nesrine El Saim, she is an environmental and climate activist who started activism in 2012. She has a bachelor's degree in physics from the University of Khartoum and a master's degree in renewable energy. She is a general coordinator of YES, the Youth and Environment Society, until 2021. She was the chair of the Sudan Youth Organization on Climate Change that she also co-founded. Adding to that, she's a junior negotiator with the African Group of Negotiators in Technology Transfer. 2020, Nesrine chaired the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisor on Climate Change, along with 6 other young climate activists, and she is the first cohort of the Marianne Initiative for Human Rights Defender, initiated by the French president. Recently, she was chosen to be part of a Young African Leaders Program for Transitional Governments at the European University, and currently, and this is why we're so happy to have her here also, she's a fellow at the Robert Bosch Academy here in Berlin, working on climate change, peace, and security. Her project focuses on youth as key actors for climate adaptation, climate action, but also peace building and security assurance. Welcome, Nesrine. Then we also have Hugo. Hugo Slim is a senior research fellow at Las Casas Institute for Social Justice at Blackfriars Hall at the University of Oxford and at the Institute of Ethics, Law and Armed Conflict at Oxford Blavatnik School of Government. He is also a visiting professor at the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Academy of Suzhou. university in China, his career has combined, as most of you probably know, academia, policymaking, humanitarian diplomacy, and frontline relief operations. He has worked for organizations such as Save the Children, the United Nations, Oxfam, CAFOD, and so on and so forth. From 2015 to 2020, Hugo was the head of policy and humanitarian diplomacy at the ICRC. He has also authored a series of books that I don't want to get into detail, but the one that I would like to mention is due out in October. It's called Humanitarianism 2.0, New Ethics for the Climate Emergency. Welcome, Hugo, to our panel. So, I'm really happy to have both of you here on stage. Let's dive right into it. We have kind of agreed on 3 topics to surf around. Let's get started. So collaboration is the all-embracing topic of this conference that we have put together. So I would love to hear you exchanging thoughts on that. What is the status quo and what needs to change? Isreen.
I was thinking of doing something that will make everyone have a full bingo.
Right.
Which is basically shaping my introduction into these buzzwords because I don't have pre-scripted. So I can literally do that. So who's in? Ready?
Go.
Okay, basically. So, well, I think after 20, I hope not 20, but at least 12 now, after 20 years of trying to build the resilience and make community engaged as much as possible, and risk sharing, the different disaster risk reduction. No, I'm joking. So basically, after 12 years of trying to engage the communities and build the resilience with a participation approach, with a lot of innovation in it, I can safely say that changing the systems and transforming the principles of humanitarian aid is key very much for what are we talking about right now. The deliverables as it is are creating a lot of dependency patterns that we need to at least break. And we have a lot of great tools that will help us doing that, like artificial intelligence. Building bridges is very important for the population because now, as a youth activist, for example, I know a lot of collaboration ideas between Global South and Global North, which will again break the dependency patterns that we talked about earlier by transforming or transformation of the humanitarian aid. Also by being more efficient and more sustainable, and I have many examples for that. In Sudan, for example, as we speak, we currently have one of the biggest humanitarian crises with more than 9 million refugees and IDPs. Yet the integration of aid is still not there in terms of really fighting the famine that might happen in Sudan at any moment. One of the biggest problems that we are right now having is the lack of holistic approach to the issue. Basically, in Sudan, in some areas, we have stage 5 famine, which is the highest, but in some areas, we have 70% post-harvest losses. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, for some reason, until now, all of the disaster risk reduction methodologies that different agencies are taking in Sudan is very much imported from outside. I mean, just to give you an example, we had a research in Sudan right now, and basically a lot of even organizations don't really understand the correlation between climate change and the humanitarian crisis. especially if there is a war context in that. So we did some interviews, and in the interviews, a lot of organizations said that there's no direct correlation between climate change and the current famine that Sudan is having. At the same time, when we listed what are the symptoms of the famine, they all agreed at the end that it's climate related. Mm-hmm. So it's even if the organizations are doing the humanitarian doesn't even understand the relationship, how would the normal population do that? Mm-hmm. And then you reach a point where it's about my survival or climate action.
Right.
And of course, people will choose their survival. So I will not, for example, preserve a tree if I don't have food to eat, if I don't have fire at night, if I don't have lighting, if I don't have a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So it really depends on how we want to do things and how can we reshape the patterns and the systems that we are doing and change the systems, actually, basically.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting and kind of also relates to bigger questions in humanitarian aid about localization of aid and so on and so forth. But you also pinpointed one very specific thing, and this is those are moral questions. And Hugo, you have been working on ethics and morality for such a long time. It's kind of your intellectual playing field, I would say. Could you take us a little bit deeper into that in response also to what Nisreen just said? Would you say it's a moral imperative for humanitarians to get deeper involved with the climate crisis?
Thank you, and I must thank you for inviting me to Berlin. It's always very kind of you, especially kind of you to invite a British person these days. So thank you, and to be included. I also want to thank you for being German humanitarian in general, and it's been a great thing to watch Germany come on the scene. Please stay on the scene. People need you. Europe needs your debate, your intellect in this area, so thank you for being German humanitarians. I'm going to pick up on that question and say, I think one of the most important ways that humanitarians can cooperate in climate action is by leaning into what I call the Earth emergency and changing our fundamental principles. So Nisreen mentioned humanitarian principles. The first thing we need to do is show that we care about the Earth as well as humans. And that means revising the principles we have from 1965 and saying explicitly that we are an all-life profession that sees no place for humanity to be isolated as a moral concern, because humanity cannot live without the Earth. And therefore, we have to really deepen our sense of humanity and compassion to include nature. So that's the first way we cooperate, by sharing the ambition for the whole Earth community and not just for humans. And of course, that comes straight to Nisreen's second point, which is the tree and the food. And that's what we have to think hard about. And what I'm thinking now is that the way we need to work as a humanitarian sector is to, in fact, adopt a landscape approach. So not be so obsessed with individual human needs, which we are probably not going to be able to keep up with, but actually to look at landscape and to look at what humans need and what nature needs in a landscape, the tree and the human, and respond to both with a combined ethic of caring for human life and all of nature's lives. And I think there we have to find this new sense of mutualism in humanity's relationship with nature, the tree and the food and the person that Nisreen talked about. And that's where we have to make our new work and our new ethics. And I would then go further and say real cooperation then means merging our agencies. We're very small as a humanitarian sector in climate action. We need to come up with agencies that show in practice that they care about nature and all life and human life, bring in ecological expertise, merge with other ecological agencies, and come up with new organizations, either that combine it in a single place, like changing MSF to care about all health and really be sans frontières, go beyond the human boundary to One Health. And if that isn't feasible or possible, work very closely in combinations with ecological agencies. So that's the first challenge we have, to get closer as a community, to share that Earth community. We, it's a new we, it's not just a human we.
If we were to merge, wouldn't that mean we would have more of those super agencies like WFP 3.0? And how does that go together with the localization approach?
So it might, but I actually think that they're the least likely to start doing it, and the first group that'll start doing it will be people in this room, the activist community, the Nasreens of this world, who see the challenge in Sudan and others. And I think we'll see this happening bottom up, because that's probably where it's going to be. But we could probably do with a few less agency. I would love it if we could get rid of the WFP, FAO split, probably merge them with UNEP as well, get it all muddled up. We need new principles, new purposes, and new organizations for the next decades.
And yeah, is it working? Do you hear me? Yeah. Let's remember the overhead cost of these big agencies too. In many places, we find that local organizations are more considerable to the environment because they are less operational. By less operational, I mean they don't have offices, they don't need generators, they don't come with big pickups. They are like working more, not locally, but organically, let me say. And normally big operations, like all of the peacekeeping missions, I did a small study on the impact of the peacekeeping mission, which is UNABIT. It's another topic, but it's very related. And I found that they did more harm to the environment than almost 5 years ongoing conflict with like a lot of cutting trees and so on, because they bring these big containers, they have these big generators and a lot of pickup cars and the emissions of these and so on. So really, and when you talk to them about it, they say we don't have a mandate for that. And our only mandate is to just peacekeeping. And I think merging mandates is really important, and having environmental mandate, at least environmental lens, is very important.
Mm-hmm. And I think then there are a lot of humanitarian organizations also sitting on this very stage. A couple of years back, I remember one saying the climate emergency is not our mandate. We got already so overwhelmed with everything else, and we do life-saving activities. What do you say?
So we need to change our mandates. We change them all the time through history. In fact, the first chapter of my book, I called it Updating Humanitarianism, and I sort of monitor where over the last 100 years we've updated our ethics, changed our mandates routinely. We need to do it again now. It's no big deal. You know, that's how ethics works. We see new things that are moral problems that hit our conscience, and we have to change our principles. So that's what we need to do. And, you know, Nasreen's right. In fact, this is an opportunity to cut the bureaucracy in the headquarters, costs. I worry, you know, entre nous, and I know we're being videoed, I worry how much money goes on the ground through these big agencies. And I mean big NGOs too. Where is it going? Where's it really spent? Are we responding to the needs of organizations or the needs of people and nature?
Organizations.
There we are. So that's what we need to change. And I think this merging, this mushing of mandates, this new purpose, this new sense of Earth emergency, which I think is more helpful than climate emergency.
But the business model will no longer work.
Which model?
The business model of the organizations.
Yeah, so we have to fight our way through to a new one. You know, this is a huge Earth emergency. We're not going to deal with it by staying as we are. We're going to have to get innovative. And that's the other thing about cooperation that's exciting, is that we humans have this hive intelligence. We have this fantastic ability to think together over countries, over nations, over cultures. We will come up with new solutions. And if we're constantly being told there's only one way to do it, and it's the traditional way, the hive is going to buzz off and do other things anyway, and the humanitarian sector will be extinct.
Yes. The online community cannot currently see it, but I'm looking into some fearful staring from the audience, because this change will also, you know, affect yourselves. If we take it seriously, then a lot of the jobs that you're currently on, our humanitarian audience, will change. And it's the question of how open we are to discomfort of this change. And I think you framed it very nicely. You were saying, yeah, it's also about creativity. It doesn't mean you lose your job, you just change the nature of your job in a way.
Or you can become an academic.
Well, it's always an option.
Just talk about it.
The third issue area that we wanted to cover in the next 5 minutes that we still have was also conflict and security. Niselin, I've mentioned that you are currently in Berlin at the Robert Bosch Academy researching the role of young people in climate and peace activities. Could you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Well, we have more than 5 minutes because we started 3 minutes late.
Right.
Always stealing time to speak. Well, basically, as a climate activist, I think my role is more about conflict prevention. So basically, really about building the resilience of the communities rather than having to have an aid at the end. So my actual job as a climate activist is not to make you have a job, unfortunately. But this is the idea that prevention is better than cure. We all know that. Yet we are all still waiting for the catastrophe to happen, and then we react after that. We react more with more losses, with more cost, but also instead of having a development, we go backward. So when the aid comes, we might or might not, but there is a possibility of returning back to the stage where we started at the beginning before the crisis happened. So instead of actually moving forward and having a development, especially in the, as they call it, the global south, we find ourselves recycling around the same stage of development we are, because every time we take a step forward, then we have a crisis that takes us many steps backward, and then we try to galvanize resources to go back to that stage before the crisis. And this is what we don't want to happen exactly. Yeah.
Right. And I think what you've just mentioned also comes back to the humanitarian understanding of time. You've just mentioned it, the traditional model that is slightly changing, but is still like reacting when losses and damages or a disaster occurs. Hugo, what is your take on the necessity to expand the time frame, maybe also of humanitarianism in light of the climate emergency?
So on the question of time, I do believe that in our new humanitarian ethics, we have to think intergenerationally as well as intragenerationally. So I sort of think with the 3 I's approach now to ecological justice, which is, interspecies, intragenerational, and intergenerational with people and nature to come. So I think that's the challenge for us to think in time terms. I just want to talk about conflict a bit because, I think, as Nisrin's shown, it's going to be really tragic that conflict will so often prevent climate action. I hope it will stay a minority geography, but it will be devastating in some places. The other real problem with conflict, whenever we have wars, whether it's Hamas, Israel, or Ukraine, Russia, they just dominate the near view political attention. And constantly, the worst thing about conflicts in policy terms is they distract us from the much bigger climate and earth emergency that is coming towards us. So that's 2 things about conflict. And the other thing I want to say is I think in terms of peace building and peace studies, which always hovers around humanitarian concerns, I also agree with what Nisrin's saying very well, that you need to be in the business of conflict prevention as a climate activist. And that does involve conflict prevention with humans to try and resolve and reconcile people fighting through and over nature, as HD Center and many modern peace builders are now doing. But more profoundly, it means as a species we have to make peace with nature. In other words, we have to welcome nature into our politics and reconcile with nature. And that is the fundamental process that we need to do in the next 10, 20 years, is to make peace with nature and to represent it in our discussions, make it a participant. So we have ways of representing rivers, forests, ecosystems in humanitarian policy discussions.
Yes. And I think it's partly already happening with climate litigation all over the world in specific places, claiming a place for rivers and nature in
I have to confess just a little detail that my first experience of working in emergency was in 1985 in northern Ethiopia. And I remember watching the Red Cross there actually taking a landscape approach. And so this is not new to us. I remember watching WFP and it was actually Nordic Red Cross agencies, taking a whole catchment area and a huge water basin and taking a landscape approach to people and nature in that context. And so we've done it before, it's part of us.
Yeah. Before we finish, I would like to invite Nesrine to speak a little bit also about power. We've discussed this briefly yesterday in our pre-conference gathering, and I think, you know, if the sector, like this humanitarian sector that most of the audience is a part of, needs to change, they also sometimes have the tendency to display themselves as people without power, you know? And yesterday I quoted one of the things you said in a podcast where you said we should be stop pushing the people with power and become the people with power. So what advice would you have for those humanitarians here who think they could not change it?
Well, basically, one of the biggest obstacles that we are facing is in a lot of times academicians, the academic work doesn't really interact with the actual implementation, but it's similar with the activism. It doesn't really a lot of times ally with the actual implementation. And my activist side will say, as I said in the podcast that you quoted, what is power? And why power is something that is important? Maybe because only specific people have the power, and so the actual importance of the power is not because of the power itself, but because only selected people have it. So as much as we make the power more horizontal or more spread, and a lot of people have powers, the significance of powers loses its power, if it makes any sense. But then this is an activism perspective of it. How can we actually make it a reality? How can we implement it? I mean, the corridors of and the systems and the politics and everything that we have right now, it doesn't really allow to have power in everyone's hand. And then again, I ask, what does system mean? And you earlier mentioned mandate. What does mandate mean? And who made this system and who made that mandate? And it's just humans like us. And they probably are oil and gas somewhere right now. So by oil and gas, I mean they passed away long ago. And then nature took its path for. So basically, what we are doing is we are shaping our lives into a system that was created in the first place to serve our life. So we moved from being the creators of the system, so the system is flexible enough to change as we change as human to serve us, to having the system and then we change according to the system, which is funny for me because it's just like bringing a washing machine and then instead of fixing the washing machine to wash your clothes, you are changing your clothes to be fitting to the washing machine. This is exactly how we are doing it right now. So basically, if we all agreed to this and we agreed to many things, yet not this, we will reach a point where we say, for example, in the General Assembly or in the UN or wherever, look, guys, what you're doing here is not really what is helping, because now we are seeing it and we can change it. And this is not just a world in the sky. We can change it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I don't have enough time to explain my plan to control the world now in the stage, unfortunately. But bilaterally, we can maybe try to do it and see if we can control the world together. But the idea is that we all control how we live with the respect of others, but also the nature, because this is the only way to survive currently in this very hard time.
Thank you so much, Nesrine. I think this is all we have time for. My understanding is be the system to change the system. Please, dear audience, give a big, big round of applause for Hugo Slim and Nesrine El-Saim for this inspiring kickoff. Thank you so much.